here. So this is where you see across, not IT guys, always get me when I do this. You'll see across the top your funds, and then you see coming down the side sort of the big category stuff. So can you guys go back up one? No, go down. Keep going up, I'm sorry. Okay. So all your receipts, your local sources, total direct revenue, okay? This 3998 account here, this on behalf of, that is how much money we paid out. That is the calculated amount that TRS is saying is owable for pension. We get it in on one side on revenue, we take it out the other side on expenditure. So it's we call it an in and an out. Disbursements are your direct disbursements. So you'll notice the 1,000 accounts, the 2,000s, the 3,000s. You see your total direct. Then you see excess of direct receipts. That's basically your P&L. That's your direct P&L. Okay, so we ended with 3.4 in the ed fund on a direct basis, so you can see where we hit. Then if you keep going down, very much like a corporate, you have below the line expenditures and revenues that are happening. So revenues, below the line revenues start at the top. So 473 corresponds, if you guys can go down a little bit to the next page. 473 matches an expenditure in the working cash because it's a transfer. What we have to be careful about, which is why I don't stop there when we talk about the financials, we actually stop on this line. We have debt that we agreed to pay for with the renovation or the construction, the new construction of IPA. The board agreed at the time to take on a debt certificate, which is basically a bank loan, and that payment is coming here, okay? So our actual excess was only $1 million. Okay, so this is the true number I would focus to, because this is really what happened. So you had $1 million in surplus in the ed fund. You were about 300 short in O&M. Debt service always is going to have a little bit more because of the timing of the debt service payments. Okay. So that's bond and interest. So sometimes that just is what that is. Transportation was about 400 and almost 500,000 short, which we knew. Municipal retirement was $1 million in surplus. Capital projects, which is another one which will fluctuate, was short 500. Working cash we still had a positive because we had so much revenue and interest income that came in. Even with the transfer, we still showed a surplus. Tort had almost $1 million surplus, and fire prevention had the 675. So all of that feeds the fund balances, which you see on line 79. You see my fund balances start to move. Can you push it up just a little bit, guys?
That's just a snapshot for that day, right?
That's a snapshot for that day. Okay. And then student activity accounts are right in below here. So none of this, remember, student activity account money isn't ours. We do have a fiduciary responsibility for it, though, so we do record it. We are basically a fiscal agent. It comes, they collect it, it comes in, it goes out. So from an AFR standpoint, this gives you probably a clean snapshot that theoretically is easier to understand if you think about it the way a school is operating, right? So it just makes it easier. As you go through the AFR, can you guys go down another page or two here? Keep going. You have more specific detailed information by fund. So this at 630 tells you for the entire fiscal year, This is how much revenue I took in on taxes and where it all went to. If you guys, can you keep going for a sec? Yep. You can see grants, right? So here's my bilingual grant. Here's transportation, or no, this is all Fund 10. Any grants that I had for any kind of specific transportation. So here's my transportation fund revenue, right? Here's receipts for restricted. So this 399 are specific grants that may have come in for the year, and it'll say on here, describe and itemize. There's a page where it's all just itemized. It didn't fit in a specific line that the state was looking for. If you keep going, it's in there. Yeah, can you guys go one more through? Keep going. So this is all, is this all my Fed stuff? Keep going. So then you start getting into, go up a little bit. So I'm starting to now get into the expenditure side. So the revenue side lays out one way. The expenditure side switches its formatting.
When we see title back on the revenue side, that's our federal stuff.
That's all your federal. IDEA, federal grants, Perkins, all that stuff.
Next page, what you're talking about. Okay.
So then when we get to the ed fund, this lays out the way people think about how how we are sort of executing the business plan for schools. So there's a set for funds, each fund, and it flows this way, right? So this is all ed fund right now. And it starts by function, okay? So if you recall, when I would do the story about the schoolhouse, right? What happens in a classroom is all 1,000 level expenditures, right? So anything that is happening inside a classroom directly affecting a student sits up in these 1,000 accounts. The 2,000 accounts are all the things that support a student in a hallway. Think about it like the hallway. So you got a principal in a hallway, you've got psychologists, you've got counselors, you've got custodians, you've got food service, you've got communications, building and district support. So you'll see it as you walk down each of these lines. So here's, for example, support services for pupil. This is attendance and guidance and health and psych and speech. So when we ask, well, how many psychologists, what are we paying for psychology services? You can come to this line and you can start tracking it across. What happens across becomes your objects. These are your accounts or your objects. Salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, capital, other, non-cap. We don't do termination benefits in this district, so you're not going to see anything in here. And then it's got a total, and it's got the adopted budget. So you'll see the total number and the budget number. So for example, I thought without activity funds, we would have 98 or 100 million. That was what I budgeted. But we only needed 98.6.
So that was my other question. How do we track budget versus?
So each month, the board sees the budget and the actual.
Those make sense.
And then this flows to this.
Makes more sense.
Yep, and then we do a true-up budget. We're so big with so many different things happening that we might maybe, and we'll talk about this when we get into the December financials, we think we're going to have $3 million worth of extra hiring that we're going to do, and maybe we only have $1 million. Well, I want that other $2 million to go into some other spaces, so it's moving around the budget a little bit differently. So we want to true it all up and make sure we've got. Yep, it's an amended budget process, and we'll do that in May and June. So if we keep going, can you guys keep going up a little bit? So stop for a sec. So here, for example, when we get to the 2400s, These are principals, okay? So it says school administration. You can see the salaries all the way across. When we talk about the business office, this isn't just the business office, because I also have transportation, food service, and internal services, which is basically our warehouse. And then central supports, right? So these are things that are global throughout the district. These are the centralized expenditures. So that would think about IT. But they benefit everybody. And then you have, and this is a question that came up at the last board meeting, or some of the questioning that came up out of that last board meeting. So line 77 is where we put community services. Anything that is a 3,000 level expenditure.
So you were saying you budgeted 2.6, but we don't spend 2.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And that's in community services. So this does not have to be itemized in that document, but we can have some conversation around how do we make sure you guys are seeing it. Typically, it is not a big expenditure for districts, which is part of the reason why it never gets broken out. Most districts don't do what we do. It is, right. So we might have to come up with a better way for you guys to feel like you've got optic into this. This is Kids Plus. It is homeless. It is all the stuff we do that is not, because remember, think about your school building. If it happens in a classroom, it's a 1,000. If it happens in the hallways, it's a 2,000. If it happens outside the school, then it's a 3,000. It's not really a catch-all. It's just nothing that is happening in a building, right? So Kids Plus, well, this is where it's supposed to go. Yeah, it goes here because that's where it's supposed to go. But it includes a lot of things we do. Most districts do not do before and after school programming, not to the level we do it. We also have Operation Hope. We have other community grants that we've come through. The blueprint is a part of this. What else do we do that we get money for, Seth? Op Hope, Lift. Lift is in here. Yep. So you'll see those sorts of expenses coming in here. Payments to other governments, we typically don't have a lot of those, but the one we do that is really critical is when we start getting into things where we have to return grant funds. You'll see that happen sometimes because I have to give money back. Or if I'm working with another school district and we agree to pay them, this is where you start picking that up.
Linda, when you talk about
What?
the 3,000, and you mentioned Lyft, specific, I'm just pulling Lyft up because you said it, or Op Hope, are our staff salaries in that line, or are they elsewhere?
So like Op Hope is in here, Kids Plus is in here.
All the employees in that group?
Yeah, like Dr. Harden is paid out of here.
So anything we spend money on for that particular issue would be in that spot. Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah, because what happens, this is where this becomes important from a state and a federal reporting standpoint. You don't want to you don't want to overinflate numbers, or you don't want to inflate numbers because you do Dr. Harden, for example, in an instructional line, because he's not serving in an instructional capacity. So you want the comfort of knowing if we say it is a principal salary, it is a principal salary here in Illinois, it is a principal salary in Wisconsin, it is a principal salary in Minnesota, California, Texas. So that's what the feds want. So they're very specific about what happens. So when we are audited, one of the things that our regular auditors do is they look at that. Where did you put it? Why did you put it there? And we get questions all the time we have to explain. When the state and the Fed come in, they do the same process. They want to make sure that the right people are paid out of the right lines. So that's part of the reason we put, if you recall, Amy, that was one of the reasons why we put the security staff in tort, so we could keep them out of the ed fund and not mix what was happening in the ed fund. We want to be able to truly say this is activity in the ed fund. The security staff is really about protection, which is a tort expenditure. So if you guys keep going a little bit up further, a couple more, yep. So what you'll see then is it'll start to get into, so every section with every fund ends in whatever the final line is. So you'll see a summing. So in the ed fund, just in the ed fund, we paid $96.7 million worth of salaries. We had 23 in benefits, we spent 20 in purchase services, and what's important to remember here, this is why history and just awareness is critical, this includes the 14 million for Columbia. So if you went back and looked at this historically, this particular subline, purchase services in the ed fund, Fund 10, this number isn't always 20. It's generally closer to 6. Who? If you do a purchase service, you're a contractor, so yes, you are a 1099. And then same thing with supplies. So supplies are a little bit higher because of the grant, the ESSER grant. So between Columbia's expenditures and then the expenditures for the grant, that came up. So these numbers, you have to go historically. And as we've been working on the forward projections, you adjust in these sorts of issues. So you're not over-inflating what you think is going to happen in the ed fund. You want to make it right. So O&M follows the same path, right? So this is all my custodians, my grounds, everybody else. Keep going, guys. Can you keep going up? Same thing for debt service is in here, transportation is in here, so there's multiple pages. Yep. And then the report ends with a number of other sub-documents that are also in there. There's additional schedules that are in this document, also good for the board to have. Administration already knows to keep some of these pages. The administrative cost cap is in that section. The debt schedules are in that section. So there's a bunch of data that reside in, this report serves one purpose. This report is one of those ones you just carry with you because there's so much that's in here to help. When CFT through AF or IFT does their comparisons across districts, they're able to just grab this data. So this data is publicly available. It's on ISB's website. Every single school district in the states, financials are there. I mean, it's if you are a data person, that's beautiful because it's just so easy to operate. Okay, in addition, one other document that the board doesn't typically see in a board meeting, but it is in the News Gazette. Can you guys go to 1C? It's typically in the News Gazette, and it is also on our website. And this document might actually be helpful too for other purposes. So every year, as a part of the audit, we have to do what's called an annual statement of affairs. There's only like 800 different ways you can take our data and put it together and put it out for people. This is another form of how our data looks. Some of you will have noticed it in the News Gazette. It's when I have that 2-pager that's back in the classified section. This one has data a little bit different and it's also kind of good data to have. So if you look at this one, this gives you capital assets. It gives you the numbers of students enrolled per grade. It gives you the size of the district. It gives you your average 9-month attendance, the numbers of employees, gives us our tax rates. Can you guys go down a page? It gives us the financials, right? Here's a quick summary of our financials. It gives us cash. So here's Mark, where you can see a comparative of the fiscal 23 cash against the fiscal 24 cash. Can you guys keep going down? It restates what was sitting in the AFR document. Go down. Another page. And then it has a summary, so you guys can see that. Keep going. This is where it gets good. And we don't always talk about, you see this. This is like 7 pages. This is the salaries of staff. So less than 25, 25 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 90, anybody 90 and more. So can you guys go down like a couple pages to the next section? Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, stop, go back up a little bit. The last part of it, which is also very helpful, right? I think this document would probably help the board with those quick questions when you're like, wait, how much did we pay somebody? So over the next couple of pages, you will see these are the firms in alpha order that we paid checks to. So if you keep going, you can see everybody we paid checks to. Keep going. All right, stop. So these are people that were paid $1,000 to $2,500. So these are all of our small checks. So keep going. Keep going. These are people who were paid $500 to $1,000. So these are our little, really big baby checks. And who got the little baby checks? Keep going. And then how much we had in contracts, and then there's a audit check. So this document is actually handy if you're just like wanting a quick answer, like, wait, how much did I pay Amerant? How much did I pay Northern Illinois Gas? Yep, or how much did I pay this person? So everything is there. And then, like I said, it's in the news, it goes in the News Gazette, it goes on our website. Yeah, and they print it, it's painful, but they print it, and it's very expensive. It's like the most expensive thing, and the newspapers make a pretty good sum on it, because all school districts have to do it. We pay for it. It is very expensive. And it goes on, more importantly, it's on our website. So if you need it, so ISB gets it, ISB.
You gotta put it on our website and print it?
Yep. And ISB has it on their website. So the data's there, it's just helping people understand how to get to it.
All that money for it?
Trust me. So that's basically the audit. I just kind of wanted to give everybody a good refresher. That's coming out, where to find data. Hopefully, if there's questions, or if this is the stuff where if there are questions, give us a call or write it out, so that send it to the superintendent so we can sit and get you guys the answers that you need on things. So, yeah, there's always going to be questions. There's a lot that goes through the financials for the district, for sure. Okay, running to December. So can you guys pull up the, I think it would be the number 2 document. Yes. Yep. So if you pull up number 2, this is in the board's, this is in the bills and treasurers report. We typically, this is what we typically go through in finance, just to make sure people have eyes into this. So the way this report's laid out with there's 2 reports. One is the old way, so this is the old way that we used to show things. And so we had board members who still knew, and staff members, they knew how to look at the old report and do things with it. I did a second version of this that is also attached.
I have a question.
Yep.
This is December 2023 versus December 2024. Now for the month, or is that year-to-date?
That is year to date to the month. This is a 6-month summary. And then budget is the full budget. So when I look at this, right, one of the things you can do with this, which I did, is you can look budget to budget, right? So that helps you understand sort of where things changed budget to budget, 24 to 25. Then you start looking at actual 24 to 25. And what you'll notice is we're high, right? And then we have the percentages. So it actually is a little bit easier to tell when you start to see some of that stuff. But it allows you to start to see then where things moved year over year, year to year, same time. So it's a comparative. And then you can start to make questions or have some more additional investigation you're doing around why. So a lot of times I'll look at this and I'll see something that's moved, not as much on the revenue side, because that's a little bit more straightforward. On the expenditure side, though, that's where you want to start digging in to say, okay, I need to understand. And when we go, can you guys go down a couple pages? Okay.
You know how we do our tax money. Because like, looking at the tax revenue, it's 51%.
Twice a year.
That's why, okay.
Right. And it could be timing. If I get something, if I got a December distribution on January 1st, it's a January revenue source, it's not a December.
So we don't know when the taxes are paid,
Later. Yeah, the county holds it until they're ready to distribute it, and then we get the distribution. And we basically get it in 2 months. We get it June, and then we're supposed to get most of it in September. We get probably 3/4 of it in September, and then we get another quarter in November and December.
in September, June.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep. So there's a secondary set of these reports, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. So this is the newer version of this report, because one of the things I wanted to do is make sure you guys all had the detail. So it's one thing to have that sort of surface quick look. It's another thing to start getting into, well, where did the detail get off, right? So, for example, on this magnet grant line, right? There's a story here that you need to know, right? We didn't budget anything because, remember, I'm on cash with this. The magnet grant went through September 30, and it was the final magnet grant. So I was still getting magnet money in the fall from the previous fiscal year. So depending upon when the expenditures happened and what the reimbursement was for, this may actually get accrued different. I may have already accrued in this when I did my fiscal 24 financials. So that's why knowing the cash versus accrual conversation becomes important, because you have to make a determination. Now, we did have a budget in 24. We really don't have a budget in 25, and that is correct based on the activity. So when I get to the expenditure side, I just have to track back and make sure I understand what happened on the expenditure side. And that's when we start running more detailed reports. But this helps you, like with title. You can see last year's budget for title was 3.6, almost 3.7. We collected through December last year 2 million. We put a budget in for 3.7, and we've collected almost 2.2 million. So title is doing exactly what we would have expected it to do. There's not a big difference here that I would expect. So can you guys keep going? Keep going. Now on the expenditure side, this is where the conversations start getting more specific, because you will notice I budgeted 61 in 24 for salaries. This year, remember, we said, oh, we're going to budget more salary and increase the salary from what we think we need, because we wanted to make sure we had cushion for hiring open positions. So I had a $61 million budget in '24. I have a $63 million budget in '25. I spent 21.1 in '23. I spent 21.1 in '24 through the 6-month period, which tells me I am like smack on. Like, this is exactly what I would have expected. It's in this group of accounts, the 111s to the 119s. I budgeted 29. So this handy dandy sheet here helps you with what that is. Administrative salary, aide salaries, library clerks, DSP, others, cafeteria. So this is everybody other than teachers. Budgeted 29.7, almost 28, 29.8. We did not think we were going to have as many support staff positions because we hired people, right? So we took people that we were supposed to be up here with teaching staff. We spent through December 12.4. I've spent through December 13.1. So this is where I need to get in and figure out what happened here. What is the story? Are these positions that we ended up needing? Did we have the salary increase that happened that we just, what happened, right? Except that, look what happened here in the 20 and the 21, which is my substitutes. I budget 4.1, I only spend $1.9 million. I budget 4.7 because we knew we were probably going to have subs. I've only spent 2. So I'm almost on top of where I was last year from an expenditure standpoint, even though my budget is higher. So when we talk about needing to do the amended budget, this is why, because you start having some of this move and you need to figure out where it needs to get replaced. The 122s to the 127s are salaries and differentials and stipends, so we start seeing that. 130 is always everybody's favorite line to look at. For some reason, it's overtime. And you have to understand what happened, right? So why am I seeing increased overtime? I've hired people that would qualify for overtime. I've got the positions hired. So why am I seeing overtime in here? So when Dan Casillas and I sit down, it's, hey, let's walk through what happened. I have, and Seth and I were just talking about it this morning. When you start up school and you have construction, you have to pay custodial staff to come in and basically blitz the building because they haven't been able to get into that building yet. Well, that's overtime. When we have snow days, because O&M reports, right? O&M gets paid overtime for coming in on snow days. So if you have a lot of snow days, you're going to drive up your overtime hours. If the cafeteria staff is missing somebody, you have overtime because somebody has to step in and help take care of that extra shift. So just knowing what's happening here, it is really small dollars in the totality of all of our labor costs, but it's a good place to just make sure you're checking. And then when you get down here to benefits, so interesting thing about benefits, right? 9.6, now I'm up to 10. Well, why? So can you guys go down a little bit? Keep going, keep going. Keep going. Benefits. Benefits are really trending exactly where we thought they should be trending from a budget standpoint, with the exception of medical insurance. Because we had to set the budget, and we didn't know where people were going to pick insurance plans. And we had people moving and picking different insurance plans than what we had originally expected them to pick. So all of a sudden, my insurance costs are up, right? That doesn't mean benefits or there's anything going on with benefits that are abnormal. It's just the medical line. And you will see that in every single fund where I have medical insurance. So we're going to have to go back in and reevaluate on the medical insurance plan process, like who's picking which plans. So that works. But these are the kind of conversations we have when we start really digging into the data on what's moving each month. So as board members, if you have questions, that's why can you guys go back up to, because I want to show you guys one more thing. Go right there, perfect. So the one of the pages that's in that packet is really a summation of everything, revenues and expenditures. Because what you're really trying to figure out, it looks really scary if you're looking at everything in detail in isolation. But the minute you put it all back together again, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm running $16 million to the positive. So even though it feels like I should have an $8 million budget, this is the poor superintendent who looks at me every week when I meet with her and says, well, wait, we had a really big budget deficit. We do. We have an $8 million deficit we budgeted for. Right now, I'm $15 million ahead. So I'm 15 million to the positive. Now that will change as time goes through, but what this is telling me is the budget, the expectation for the actual performance is holding. I expect us to break even or better. And we're going to be able, we are trending to do that. Debt service, I don't get excited about because that's a timing problem. It's levied, right? We always have enough money to pay for it. And capital projects should be a deficit because I'm not generating revenue. I'm using fund balance. Well, no. We have fund balances. You have like 8 million of fund balance sitting in here. So you're never gonna, unless you sell bonds, you have no revenue to go up against the expenditures. So this is, whoops, go back, guys. This is the one that really is the summation of everything that happens in the district. So you have to go, what? It's right, go up one, guys. There, so it's the final page. As you go through the expenditures, it'll be that very next page.
Oh, page 7 of 8.
Which document, the 1C, 1B?
2.
It's 2. It's your regular board, it's your board treasurers.
Page 7 of 8.
And then, can you guys go up now again, two or 3? Keep going. No, I'm sorry, go down. My bad direction, wrong direction. So this format that you saw on the revenue side also exists on the expenditure side. So it follows the one report, and it helps, again, give us detail, like where actually is this happening. So if can you guys go down a couple more slides? So if you see in here, for example, so here's salaries, here's some purchase services, right? So here's the fund that it's happening in. So this is all O&M now. So O&M, professional technical services, we had like 850,000 last year because we had some projects and some things we were trying to get done. We had the transportation building. This 576 is what we budgeted this year. Last year we spent 461. This year we've only spent 100,000. And so we probably won't spend this budget. So when we go through the amended budget process, we'll start figuring out what we can basically what we're going to start truing up. Rental, we had the lease agreement. Remember last year, the students at Novak were over at Parkland, so we had a lease agreement. And so this year, we put money in because we had the increases as well that happened over at the lift building, that big 4 freight building. And then you can see, this should help board members who have questions like, well, how much are they spending on the telephone? How much do they spend on travel mileage? What are they spending on conferences? What are they spending on, keep going down.
It tells you where you're at on the budget.
How much are they spending on water, advertising? How much are they spending on supplies? What's our natural gas and electric look like? Right? So when somebody says, well, how much does it cost you guys to do your gas and electric for the buildings, right? This is a good way to catch it. We knew, well, it was supposed to come down. Unfortunately, it's gone up because of the increases on sanitary sewer and some of the other ones. So again, and then this follows each fund, goes all the way to the, if you guys keep going all the way to the bottom, every single fund is in here, all the way to the bottom at health, life, safety, and then the bottom, right? So we had 234 in the budget last year, mostly because we had all that ESSER money. We don't have the ESSER money, but we did have increased expenditures, so the budget's about $10 million less in expenditures. We had about 101 million of expenditures through December. We're at 104. So overall, we're still doing good. So again, this gives you, this version of that report gives you a lot of detail so that it's easier for you to grab questions as you've got them. And we can talk through what your more specific. It does.
Without any explanation.
It does, absolutely.
Do you do a narrative or not?
We have not ever done a narrative for the
Way
board.
out of whack, you just put a narrative in it.
Usually, when I'm meeting with you guys, I'll say, like this health insurance thing, that's going to be a longer, bigger project we're going to have to start getting into. And where we're seeing changes with salary, like we understand it, but we need to really we need to be really explicit, because FTE, the most important thing that drives through this district is FTEs. And so being able to be very explicit about what is happening in the district currently, what needs, what the needs are, what's going to happen. And that process starts every single year. So Ken's beginning that process now. He's going to sit with the superintendent. They take a look at what we currently have, what is currently not filled but needed, what was not filled, we thought we maybe needed it, but maybe we don't need it. And then they'll right size what they want to do, and then they'll come back and I'll start filling that into the budget.
Or this month we set back some money because we couldn't fill a grant because we could not keep it.
If we can't fill a grant, maybe we want to apply for a grant. So remember, a lot of the times with grants, we're upfront on our costs and then we come backwards. And then we get it through reimbursement. So there's pieces that move, but beginning and ending for the district is really FTE. How many staff positions, how many students, right? It's a more complicated process than it sounds. So.
And Mark, I just also wanted to state with the grant, most times we will ask for more because we want to make sure we have too much and not enough. So that's
Whenever you
part
get
of
a
it.
grant, you're trying to accomplish it. If you can't, you can't.
Right, exactly.
Especially when you got to hire people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the return of the money on the grant was not nobody wants to ever
Don't like
do
it, but
that.
it happens.
But the idea was we were going to be able to find the people we thought we needed to hire. And when you can't, the state, somebody else needs that money. It's not fair for us to hold on to
Well,
it
I'd
just
rather
because.
send it back than pay it back,
Right.
because that means we spent it somewhere else.
Yeah, and the state board never has a problem with that, as long as you are documenting what you're doing and how and we have to fill out monthly expenditure reports and their check and all that stuff, so.
Yeah, it's better to pay back or give back than to pay back because you did wrong. So, yeah.
Paid back means you probably spent it somewhere else. Now it really
Right,
isn't. paid back.
exactly. So that when you're
Return
giving it
is-
return, there you go. That's it, you're returning.
Third is just a net
Yeah.
zero.
Yes.
So questions, and we will get questions when this gets published, because we usually do. But like, for example, picking one out, the King's Daughters School, $10,542 was paid. Who is that? What is that? Why did we pay that?
So are you on the,
I'm in your checks.
okay, so let's talk through checks for a sec. So everybody has under, so pull up 3A, if you guys could.
I'm not in that. I'm in your,
Oh, you're in board docs.
no. Oh,
1C?
yeah.
Oh, it should just be 3. I'm sorry. 3 is the check register. That's what happens when I get fancy with my Post-it notes. So pull that up, and then everybody should have this little handy dandy presentation I did. Okay, so, is there an extra one, Seth? Oh, for the superintendent, could I have one? Yeah. This one? Is that over there? Yeah.
There's like 2 copies of everything.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Okay. So let's just sort of walk through at the top level what to look at with this check register, because there's a couple different ways to think about this. So I did talk to Michelle about trying to do a check register in a different order. The difficulty becomes this. This is the district's official check register document. So it comes out of the system, it comes out as a PDF, and it locks, which means when the auditors go back and they look at stuff, this is what they want to see. So I still have to have this document. What we can do is start doing a better job of helping everybody just sort of read through it so that they can isolate what they're trying to find. So when you look at the top of the check register, start with the columns. So the first column here doesn't mean anything to you guys. It does to the auditors because they're looking for what cash account this is coming out of. They also care about this because this is the literal check number. They care about the issue date because they're tracking back on the GL on a day by day. So they want to see, okay, so on the 10th, I should have seen this activity. You guys care about this because this helps you sort of contextualize what day the check got cut. Every person or entity that gets paid out of the district has a unique vendor ID number. And with that vendor ID number may or may not be backup material for, there's always 2 things or 3 things for sure with each vendor. There is a vendor form that they fill out, which basically is their name, their address, their social security number. If they are a corporate entity, it'll be their tax ID number. And then if they are a corporate entity, we get the tax, they fill out a W-9 for us. If they are a vendor, there's also an additional form that the state requires we collect on whether or not they're a WB, an MBE, a DVB.
Do we check to make sure they're a valid business, or they can tell us they're a business entity?
We don't have enough people to be able to go through everybody's tax ID. Generally speaking, you can tell when you look at something if it's generally if there's a contract involved, that's when I get involved and I'll start doing a deeper look.
If there's a contract involved, then we have to make sure that the entity is still valid with the Secretary of State or whatever state they're out of.
You're going to give me 3 more people for this? Do you
But with
see
the
these checks?
I understand about paying a check, not that, but with a contract, we
I
don't do
know.
that?
With a contract, I will, mostly because the contracts we write are with known entities. If it's not with a known entity, I'll ask to see financial statements, I'll do a Google search, I'll try to figure out who they are.
All you do, look, see if they got a valid entity.
But wait a minute,
That's a 2-minute job.
but if somebody's executing a contract in the district, do all those contracts come to you for approval?
Not all of them.
That's, I mean,
So we're just getting, so the vendor setup can happen at the building level, the cabinet level member, whoever is doing it, program member. We just see the requisition as it's starting to come through. So then we'll backtrack in and make sure that at least at a minimum, we have documents to satisfy the tax information and the state vendor form.
Do auditors ever spot check?
No, auditors wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Then how do they know they have the money to do it if they're not coming to you saying, do we have the money?
It's in their budget. They know if they've got money in their budget or not to do it. So there's, with rare exception, not rare exception, I would say with the exception of contracts that start to get very big. So think about somebody doing like AJ behind the wall here, he's doing a lease contract with a IT vendor. And he brought it in and said, hey, can we go through this contract? And then I'll start looking at terms and conditions and pricing and what we're doing on that to make sure he's comfortable, that he understands what he's doing. And then we'll talk about, do you have it in your budget? Do you not have it in your budget? Did you talk to somebody? If it's not in a budget, did you talk to the superintendent? Does she know that you're thinking about doing this? We should bring it back. Is it over 35? Does it need to go to the board? Right, so there's like a whole series of questions that we kind of walk through there. But I don't have enough people to go through and figure out that these people are legit people. If they've got a tax ID number, they've got an address, it doesn't look squirrely. Every once in a while, we find things where we see people with squirrely tax IDs or squirrely social security numbers, or we'll have 6 people at the same address. And that's when we'll start catching it and say, yeah, we can't do this. So kind of continuing to walk through it. So the budget code is where this budget code and this account code are the meat. And also then, Amy, connect back to some of the things that we just talked about with some of the other financial data. So our account code structure is consistent. First 2 digits are always the fund. The next 4 digits are the function. The middle 2 digits after that are the location. The last 4 digits we have as programs, and I gave everybody the list of all the program accounts. So if you wanted to look at, well, who is 2513, you actually have the program document. So I can tell you right now, just by looking at this, that it's an education fund. 1500 is athletics. So I know it's athletics. 20 is Edison, and 2513, probably base 2 on the description, is probably my basketball account. It's a program, okay? Girls basketball. And then how much we wrote for the check. So can you guys go down a little bit? So all checks, anything that comes out of the district sits in this report when we run the checks, whether it's an athletic check, an activity fund check, or a general check. So can you guys keep going down? So hold here for a sec. So now you've gotten through the activity accounts. Now all of a sudden you're starting to see all these different account codes, right? IMRF. I know it's an ed fund. 2134 is probably something in one of the support services lines. I'd have to figure out what that is. 00 means it's a district, okay? There's no program, and it's a 212. So that tells me it's a past service payment. You will see these on IMRF and TRS. This is penalties that we have to pay back to TRS or IMRF because somebody either worked too short or too long or had more than a 6% increase in their final 4 years, and we have to pick up the penalty. So we get penalized pretty heavily for that. It makes Seth knows. He comes into my office and he's like, I'm just gonna leave this here and then run away. And so then we go through that. Verizon, this was all the Verizon bills for this particular check run on December 18th that were run. So the first one up here 10 is an ed fund. 3,900 means it was something that happened out of the community account. In 2007, I believe is probably, is that Kids Plus? Where's my program? Do you have that program document? So the program document's going to look like this. It's Kids Plus. So this tells you whoever this was a Kids Plus employee. This is 10/1800/00 with no zeros. That tells me it was actually somebody in the multilingual department. 3,900, 3,900, 18, 39, 39, 18. Then our all-time favorite, Amazon. Okay, now, again, I've said this a couple different times to folks. We actually don't buy a ton. We've lost a lot of local vendors who will take open POs from us. So it's not like I can send, and we really don't have anybody other than maybe Staples or the grocery store or Target to go run and buy office supplies, which would also pull our office staff at the buildings out to go shopping, which probably is an efficient use of their time. So Amazon totally fills the bill. We can see it, we can isolate it, we can go individual order by individual order and figure out who bought it and what they were doing with it. So this, on December 5th, there was an Amazon order that was office of the principal, so 10, 2410, 31, means this is something that Sarah Sanders asked to purchase, 413 construction paper, $4.10. And we can go through we literally go through every single Amazon item. That's why the Amazon section is so big, because it's every item that gets purchased. And then you can see what they did. The negatives are the returns, right? So you can, sometimes you'll see a in and an out because it was a return, so we have to show it. Can you guys keep going down? Just sort of randomly in the middle here, 10, 1201, 50, and then 000. So this is Fund 10, so the Ed Fund, this is probably, I don't know if Suzanne made 1201 Crosscat. We started getting very explicit with the SPED expenditures so that we can really track it. But it happened in IPA. 410, it was this order, so we would have to go back in and pull up what that order was because of how they described it, but it was $140. Sometimes, like here, the 9049, so 10, 2330, but the 9049 tells me that it was one of the federal grants, and it was something that they purchased for one of the federal grants. So again, if once you begin, can you guys go down a little bit more? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Yep. So amplify, right? So this is a T&L purchase, and I can tell that it was bought for one of the buildings to help them because it's got a building code in the middle, 16, as opposed to a 000 and a 2060. So I can tell that's what they did when they bought that. AT&T, 2664. That is the IT department. So this is not AT&T from the standpoint that it's an AT&T expense like that. It's something that IT had to buy in order to get additional access and ports. You can see here where they said ports. Big Four Freight, right? This is 2542. It's a rental, and here's the monthly rental payment. Keep going down. Go for sport, right? So go for sport sometimes shows up as an expenditure in the athletic department. In this case, it actually shows up for 2020 is PE, physical education. So these are soccer balls and nets for, who's 11? Stratton? Whichever school is 11. Yeah, it's got to be an elementary school because it's an 11-10. And so you can see, as these expenses sort of come through, what they're doing. This one, 1,500 means the athletic department did do it, and it was at Central, and it was basketball. Laser's Edge, Lincoln National is insurance. Amber Logan, when it looks like this is an employee payment. So in this case, we provide salary advances for our initial young teachers so that they've got a little bit of money to get started with that before that first paycheck comes in. So when the board has questions, it's helpful to just sort of with the detail, like what expenditure are we really focused to, what page, if there was a check date, or if there's an account number. So some stuff might be easy, and you'll look at it and go, okay, yeah, now I know what it is. Some things are going to be, okay, I have no idea what this is, and I really want more information. So this should help you sort of isolate what you want more information on, so it doesn't feel like you're sort of digging through a ton of stuff. And then the rest of this presentation sort of just is a narrative of what I just went through with you guys to sort of talk through that.
So when we talk about the teachers, right, the TRS payments, and you know, that's a big state conversation right now, how they've not funded the teachers' retirement system. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about how that affects taxpayers and increases of taxes to cover what the state is defaulting. Does anybody ever connect that back to bargaining across the state? That when are that has to be a bigger conversation when we bargain to say, that's great, you can say, let's do X, but here's the fallout bigger and beyond in our budget. It's what did we just affect at a state level that's going to come back in and affect a community?
So a couple things. This has been a hot topic for probably the last
7 years.
Yeah, it's, or more. It goes back way back. So the fastest way to think about what the impact to local taxpayers would be is to take a look at the on behalf.
The what?
That on behalf of payment that was in the audit. So I think it was 38 million, let's call it. If the state were to say, and this has been proposed, right? So this came out during Rauner's term, where he said, hey, we're going to punt this whole thing right back to local governments. They set up this thing with their teachers and how much they're paying them. We want them to pay for this. The reason that didn't get any traction is because that 38 million would have come back on top of taxpayers. And so what he was trying to say was, well, we'll do a partial share, right? He came up with this weird partial share. Ultimately, taxpayers would be way on the hook. And it was an attempt to penalize the districts that had overpaid administrators. I will say this, I know that there's that perennial conversation around the fact that people always feel that administrators get overpaid. When you start to stack up where Champaign is in that conversation against the rest of the state, given the size of the district that we are and the complexity of what we are in terms of a unit district like this, we're actually on the lower middle part of that conversation. So we're not at the bottom, but we are definitely not up at the top. But 38 million is still a lot. So imagine if you're a district and you've got 50, 60, 70 million that you have to now chunk out to taxpayers. you don't have a whole lot of space to be able to handle your taxes and be able to do this. So conversations about pushing it back to taxpayers would also have to be coupled with property tax relief conversations, which nobody's been able to do.
No, you're
That's what
misunderstanding.
Ryder was trying to do, was push it back to property taxes so the local people would get mad enough to do something about it.
No, you're missing my point.
Okay.
My point is, we pay that. When
Talking
you,
about the overpayment,
no. When you go to bargain,
right?
that also needs to be a consideration that is also a part of the discussion, is it's gonna go from 35 million to 42 million. That pension it has to be
Somebody's
accounted
paying
for.
it.
Somebody's paying it, and we should be accounting for that as a part of the math. That's all I'm saying. I don't know that we've ever done that.
We've probably not done it, but I don't know that it's lost on IEA or IFT at the state level, that this is something, if it goes bad. We're only liable for our share, but what Amy's saying is if you were to give, for grins and giggles, let's say you gave the teachers an 8% contract, you're going to increase the amount that's owed back for TRS over time, right? So it'll grow, it grows with time. So 20 years from now, taxpayers would be, if it came back, taxpayers could be saddled with this very large on behalf of payment that happened as a result of a contract negotiation that was done years before.
And I'm not saying, I don't think they'll ever get that shift to ever happen. That's not my fear. That is a real number and it should be accounted for, but I don't know that we've ever done that.
We never bring it up to, we never have brought it to the table yet, in the probably 5 or 6 negotiations I've been involved in. It's not come up unless it was during that Rauner period. There were some times where we sat at the table during the Rauner governorship years and said, we have to be very thoughtful about the fact that this very well could come back on taxpayers. And so whatever we do, the best thing we can do right now, from that standpoint at a local level, is to make sure we continue to monitor that 6%. We're pretty fastidious about this monitoring of the excess of 6%, but every once in a while, we can't help it. And the penalty for missing the 6% is pretty significant. And so, Seth and the payroll department are on it. Ken is on it. I mean, we got checks and balances to try to make sure we're constantly looking at it. But, it could be something as simple as a custodian who decided to retire early and for some reason was a part of those COVID years. Mm-hmm. Those COVID years have come back to really hurt us because they pushed a bunch of salaries up. And nobody intended to do anything wrong. I mean, we were trying to help people during that period of time, but we had some situations where we were probably $2,000, $3,000 on top of everybody's base, which is definitely more than 6. And now that they're retiring, it's part of their last 4-year calculation. So we just need to get through some of it, and it should re-level itself. But
It's less a penalty conversation, assigning blame conversation. It's a reality conversation.
But it costs. I mean, it takes funds away from students when we have those situations, and we are really aware of that. So, all right, so the last document sets that you've got. So if there's still questions about what's sitting in, King's Daughter School is a private placement facility.
I'm assuming, but where?
They're not Tennessee, Kentucky,
It's Tennessee,
somewhere else.
but why, we'll have that conversation. But that is,
Yeah, and
those are
that's
things we get asked.
Those are good conversations to have with SPED. Without a therapeutic day program and a hospitalization program, we need to, whoever has a bed some days. There were districts up north that were sending students out to New York. Because we just.
Well, we don't have a choice. It's
No.
where the bed is open. But
Correct.
that is a real conversation to come back to the table with, to explain that is a state problem and that is a federal problem, but it is felt here.
It's really expensive. And part of the reason I gave you the legislative update, so the legislative update includes ISB's current budget thinking, so this is what they gave to the governor. The reality is the state isn't going to have enough money to be able to do all of the things that everybody would like them to do. So things are going to have to start coming off the table. One of the things that they're talking about coming off the table are all of the MCATs. And so special education, some of the aspects of special education are sitting in those MCATs that are now only going to get funded at 75%. And when that starts to happen, we are going to have to go back to, we had that conversation today on a call I was on. It's probably appropriate to start thinking about what these costs are going to be. The needs that students are bringing to the district are exceeding the ability that we have to normally get reimbursement.
We're going to go from 48th in spending for disabled to 50th for spending it. But probably
It's
49.
every-
I don't think we'll
every-
ever get worse than Mississippi, but
Remember
we're going to drop a spot.
The good news about some of this is it's universal. It's not an Illinois issue. To Amy's point, it's a federal issue. So we have to begin to really deep dive once the processes start moving about how best to handle what we are starting to see, which is, do we sacrifice EBF in order to ensure that MCAT funding comes back up? Because no one has control over MCAT funding.
Well, and the other piece is the Medicaid chipping away is what I've been watching, and who knows what's coming. And that's a deep concern for how we revenue source that.
Medicaid is going to be a problem. I'm very interested. I have a meeting coming up with food service. We're going to come up to the end of the cycle, the approval cycle for CEP. We knew going into CEP, so CEPs are universal free food. We went into that knowing that we were going to lose money, right? It wasn't, we were pretty forthright about the fact we knew the program was going to lose money, but it wasn't going to lose so much money that it was a problem. And we thought it was going to be the right thing to do. Now that I'm starting to see reductions in the amount of the reimbursement, the question becomes, should we stay with CEP? Is it still worth the amount of money that we're going to lose plus? Or do we want to start reverting back to normal behavior? Is that reimbursement better? And I think we're going to have to just see how numbers go. We're going to have to see what the federal level administrators are doing, how they're sort of approaching this, and then make some really intelligent presentations to you guys to have to make, because those are going to be hard decisions.
Correct. And part of that is also what we're spending on transportation. You look at taxi, and that's not consider the homeless piece, but we're transporting out. What are we going to save if we actually invest locally? So those are hard, but real conversations about how to keep it here.
Correct. So anyways, the legislative update I thought was good. A little bit of conversation today around Tier 2. It sounds like COGFA came out with a report. Did you see that? It's kind of with $30 billion to pay that, they're going to have to come up with another solution to Tier 2, which creates another problem. Who wants to be a college graduate today and not have not be paid? Well, starting teachers still don't really make a lot of money. And who wants to do it and not get a pension, right? Because that's really what Tier 2 is facing.
Do you think they would ever shift it to SSI?
It's not nearly at the same level. I mean, it's probably worse than corporate.
Never mind.
Yeah, but they get pretty well-funded 401ks. What they're talking about doing in Tier 2 was never a good solution. And so it's very difficult when we talk about how do we find teachers, you have to have something that makes them want to do this job. And the economic package has to be a little bit more.
Can we offer that part of the 403B? Can we fund a teacher's 403B?
That
Is that
is a
legal?
conversation.
Or is that something you got to deal with
It's a conversation we've had, because remember, the unfortunate part is, and this, we also brought this up on the call today, everybody is a part of a bargaining unit. So if I do one, I have to do the other. I can't just pick and choose employees based on certain aspects like that. So they were talking about bringing the para. Did you hear this story about the paras? So the whole concept of making sure that paras received 6% automatic increases every year, which sounds great from a heart position, is impossible to deal with for school districts, because everybody would have to go at 6%. I can't have just one group at 6%. Well, but and it's expensive. So I think as people are working through these solution sets and trying to develop some answers for this.
Put it up, because they figured that what everybody would look at, feel sorry for, knowing that everybody else.
Well, legitimately, they have a difficult job. So it's not, it's the correlation connection between all the other bargaining units that creates the hiccup, so. All right, next board meeting is February, so for the board, you will have the auditors doing the audit report. I asked them to keep it really short. They're at like 10 pages with an intro and a question page, so 8. So it should go fairly quickly.
Tell me real quick, reiterate blueprint money for me.
In terms of
What is it? Who participates?
the city, so we got federal ESSER ARP money. The city got a city version of that. And so what they decided to do with their funding was to push a chunk of it into the community for strategic goals that they had. They had a number of strategic goals, so they pushed it to a number of community partners based on goals. One of the goals was violence reduction. So they have a whole host of people that they push this money to say, we want you to use this money and hit this goal. So that's the blueprint money that we received. Honestly, we tried to give the money back, and we were told we couldn't give it back, we had to take it. The city had very, very specific spending.
So do we
things
have
that
to go
they
along
wanted
with the
to
city?
happen.
Is that the deal? Is that
It's all driven by the city. They tell
Okay.
us how they want us to spend it, they tell us who they want us to
but
spend
it's
it
our
with.
money, but we got to do
It's
what?
not our money, it's their money, we just are executing it for them.
So are we their fiscal agent?
Yes, in many respects, we are a
I'm
fiscal agent.
familiar with that term from other stuff,
Yep.
but yeah, so,
In many respects, we are acting like a fiscal agent.
okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah, so they gave us the budget number. They said, this is what we want it spent on, this is how we want it spent. And then Dr. Harden and Kate Kress meet with their counterparts at the city weekly, and everything.
And we didn't have a choice in the vendors.
We were strongly asked to ensure that these particular vendors, or that a particular group of vendors, because what they wanted to do was to maximize other blueprint partners together. So they were basically stacking with vendors. So maybe this vendor over here who was working on this part of it with the city, and this vendor that was working with this part of the city, and then they said, you should use this vendor, because then this vendor can work with you guys and this.
Do we have a
and
choice at
this.
it, though?
What?
We had a choice, right?
You could call it that.
So when we,
I'm just not happy with the vendors we chose, that's all. That's what I'm getting
It's,
at.
I understand, and we have had conversations with the city. They are looking at this too, because they finally caught, we sent back a bunch of stuff and said, we're not comfortable dealing with this.
Do we have to, when we do like those vendors, do they run through the same background checks and everything else we do for all the people that are involved with our kids? Because if they're in a room with our kids, don't they have to be background checked and doing all this other stuff?
Not if they are an outsourced program like that.
Whoa.
As long as we have a district administrator with the
So
student.
we got our kids in a room.
They
with
were not
that.
invited as our kids. It is a part of a blueprint program that's being done in coordination with the city. it is a really set of fine lines that start getting drawn.
So have our attorneys chimed in on our liability on that relationship?
When we did the original grant application, yes. When we did the grant paperwork with the city.
So they said we're okay from a liability standpoint.
'Cause
So the
it's-
kids that were chosen to go to this, the city gave those parameters?
I am assuming, I did not talk to Dr. Harden about how those students were selected, but I would expect, given how they have done other things, that the city
They would
has
have to by the
some
grant.
awareness of how these students were
Well,
coming
that's
in.
spelled out in the grant, it has to be.
Well, and then you've got, and the questions we're getting are, the same vendors got money from the county, they got it from the district, they got it from the city. So the onus, the clarity I want is that Unit 4 did this in conjunction with the behest of, and if there was a double or triple dipping, that is not us.
Correct.
That is not us.
That is
the
what I want to
city-
make super clear.
All we do is we submit expenditures to the city keeps their database, because they're actually responsible for that money.
Well, what the community sees too is they see whether or not it's right or wrong. The community sees our kids with these vendors in a room where if they were in our schools, those vendors would never pass our background checks.
But you also have to keep in mind that the students who are identified to be a part of this work are not your typical student. They're kids who need people who have street cred, who have done some things, who can help guide them to the right direction. And unfortunately, some of those people are great people, but because we are a school, we could never hire them.
Right.
But they do know how to reach the students that need to be reached.
Well, my point is that I know there's people in this town that have that street cred, that could pass the background checks, and that would do this in a much more favorable way. If it wouldn't even take the damn check, they would do it on their own. And there's some good people out there that would provide.
Tell them to come on, we'd love to have them. Unfortunately,
We're
we
using
have to.
some. We're using
We're using
some.
some, we have to, this is particular, yeah, and when we didn't spend the money, we were criticized. And that now we're spending the money, we're being criticized. So our job, and like I said back in the day when we got this, our job is to teach our students to read, to do math, and to write, and to be good citizens in that regard. Our job is not gun violence, but because we wanted to be good partners, we agreed to go ahead and do this work because it was impacting our students' ability to learn in the school environment. They have other things outside of school they were bringing to school that need to be addressed, that we don't have time in the school day to address.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is it would probably be better if we would have made this clear with the community and at least the board members, so when we got the questions, we could respond in an appropriate way.
We did do a couple of presentations, and we can give those back and remind people where to go find those. It was a big deal, so this is not new.
It was very clear.
Yeah, it was
But the-
very
I
clear.
wasn't
The
there, so I'm
clarity
just saying.
now, you know, the people that saw it then, that are seeing it now, including me, like, wait, what is happening? Refresher is always good.
Yeah, so we don't have a problem doing that at all.
Yeah, and again, if it,
Well, you don't need to do it for everybody, you could just give
This
me the
is
field.
not our-
paper.
But if you're getting the questions, we want to make sure we're giving you the right information to help answer the questions, and we're okay with that, so.
You don't need to do it for everybody, just give me the paper.
there is, this is not our money.
Yeah, I understood that.
This is the city's money, it was the city's grant. They asked us to execute on their behalf a series of programmatic endeavors.
And I think the trick is, it's coming now through the check register. That's what people are seeing, which is fair. It is fair. But now we have to say it again.
Makes sense.
That's why the 30, so Blueprint, because it is such a unique program. So it's different than Op Hope. Op Hope was a grant. We applied for the grant, we wrote for the grant, we monitor that, we do that. We get money from the city and we get money from United Way.
Do we have any board members or staff that got paid through those grants?
No. Unless they were getting stipends as teachers, which would have required a posting. We have a whole formal process.
Yeah, and if you're a board member, you would have to disclose that too, wouldn't you?
Correct. There's board member conflict documentation
thought.
that sits in board docs with your board policy.
Right.
So teachers get stipends, right? Support staff can apply to get They can apply for this if it's an
Sure.
open position. So we have a whole
But
HR process.
if they get picked
this.
for that, then it has to be disclosed, is what you're telling me is all.
Well, it would be, if it was a board member, the superintendent would have known about it,
Yeah.
like pronto, because there isn't, they would have had to have applied through a process, like a normal HR process. So
Of which you would know, who's there, okay.
If they're being paid, I would know.
they're being paid by us, but again, remember.
There are,
this is-
there are district people who are in the room helping and doing different things, but they don't get paid.
Yeah.
So,
And,
exactly.
and we have no
Unless the-
control over the other partners of grant programs.
Right. Now, if you're a board member or a district employee and you do something with Blueprint with another entity, we have no control over that. Mhm. And if you are a employee and you apply to do some of the work outside of your regular workday, you could be paid for that. Teachers, because that was part of the issue. We couldn't find anybody the first time who were staff members to do some of this work because people were overworked and exhausted. Mhm.
So.
Anything else?
No, that was it. Did you have any questions? I feel so bad for Lee's over there like.